football is really interesting. not just lingerie league football, but like just regular arena football is really interesting. Like the walls make for a interesting dynamic to the game that you don't have otherwise, and like it's very strange. Like you have to think about the game in a completely different way. The way they play that. It's
it
very
feels
cool.
like it feels like a game that would only. Oh, I'm hearing myself. It feels like a game that would only be played north of the border, and I mean like Canada, obviously, where it just seems like it's like let's mix hockey and like lacrosse and actual football, but then even when that doesn't work out, just throw some bitches in lingerie and see what happens. The lingerie football league feels more American, but just regular arena football feels like some concoction that like a hockey fan would come up with because you can't play football 9 months out of the year up there. That's also my very obtuse view of Canada, but I stand by it.
Just hockeyfy everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Eh? I've never been to an arena football game. We used to have a team, Georgia Force, that played the building they played in is 15 minutes down the road, but I don't even know if the arena football league exists anymore. Or, I mean, if it does, if we have a team, I don't know where they play. That's how well they're doing.
I'm pretty sure it's still a thing, but I don't know how widespread it is. It was pretty popular there for a hot minute. I guess the Kurt Warner phenomenon kind of made it a hot thing. Like there was Kurt Warner that came out of the Arena Football League, and then there were a couple receivers that came out of there too. And so like that kind of gave it a life. And then I guess unless you keep getting a Kurt Warner every several years, eventually that's going to kind of die off.
Yeah, so it looks like arena football. They have the indoor football league, which I don't know what that is. And then I scroll down and I see arena football 2022 expands to 6 teams in 2022. Now, this article is about 12 and a half months old. I don't know if they ever made it to that. But if they were expanding to a grand total of 6 teams for this year, I don't think they're doing so good.
Like I said, it was popular for a hot minute.
Yeah. Well, they came out with a video game and everything, and the video game, I never owned it, but I've seen it be played. It looks fun as all hell. It's like NFL Blitz, but with football rules, actual football rules, I guess.
I was gonna say that's got to be a blitz type of a game if you're gonna make a arena football game. It's got to be some sort of a blitz style of.
Oh yeah. You just use your hockey platform because it's literally played on the same dimensions with the walls and play, and you just have 3 down linemen, a quarterback, I think 2 receivers and a running back, and that's it. And then you just let her rip.
Lots of fun. Well, speaking of, the whole reason we're here tonight is we're going to pick some bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of these bowl games are, they have about as much meaning as an arena football game.
And I think even the players on the team feel the same way.
So there have actually been a handful of bowls that have already been played. The irrelevant bowls. Let's see. Troy beat Texas San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
UAB beat Miami of Ohio. Oregon State beat Florida in the Vegas Bowl. That's the only significant one I've come across so far.
Beat their asses too.
Man.
I mean, and they were up 30-0 in that game. Florida kicked a field goal to make it close.
Boise State beat somebody in the Frisco Bowl. BYU won their bowl over SMU. Southern Miss beat Rice. Louisville beat Cincinnati. Fresno State beat Wazoo. Marshall beat Connecticut. Toledo over Liberty. EMU, I'm guessing that's Eastern Michigan, beat San Jose State. And then last night, Western Kentucky beat South Alabama. So we haven't missed any significant bowls yet. I don't.
No, like if it was 1984, that BYU SMU game would have been magical. Same with Louisville and Cincinnati. If it was 2014, that would have been a damn good game. That would have probably been a New Year's Six.
I would say, yeah,
right there at it.
Within the last 5 or 6 years, that was a high profile matchup. And this year, it's the Fenway Bowl, whatever the fuck that is.
Well, it's the bowl of the coaches that are going to go coach for the team on the other sideline, because the Louisville coach left Louisville to go be Cincinnati's new coach. And Cincinnati's coach is now up in Wisconsin. And I don't know who's coaching Louisville. And I have no idea if Louisville's coach – it would have been very awkward if Cincinnati's new coach stayed on to coach Louisville against his future team and beat him 24-7. Conversely, it'd be hilarious if there wasn't a coach to be found and it was just Louisville that just drew up some plays in the dirt and beat that ass while the the Louisville coach is sitting on the side like, maybe I didn't make the right call here. Maybe Louisville to Cincinnati is a bit of a lateral move.
I could be wrong. I think Louisville. I think Louisville's going to have Jeff Brom is going to be their coach. Let me see if I can. Oh, yep, there it is. Yeah, Jeff Brom's first Louisville early signing days is in the books. So,
when they're in, it's, I would lose at trivia. I would lose at trivia if the topic was bowl games, because they change sponsorships too often. The locations are weirder than ever. Like, for example, staying on this Louisville-Cincinnati game, it's the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. So it's just bastardized everything all over the place. It's in Boston. There's nothing spicy about Boston. Wasabi goes with sushi. I don't think of, nigiri, tuna, or, whatever the fuck, sashimi, none of that shit. I think of nothing spicy or Japanese when I'm thinking of Fenway, much less Fenway is a baseball stadium. It was built for baseball. Football should never be played in that building. What are they doing? Fuck that whole bowl. Find a high school in the area to go play it there. These people have no respect for tradition.
Let's see. Tonight we've got Baylor taking on Air Force. We picked this one last night.
We're not looking so hot.
Say we both took Baylor, and so far that's not working out in our favor. But it's only the second quarter. Yeah. A lot of football yet to be played. We'll check back in on that one later on in the game. Let's see. What do we got? What are the bowls coming up here in the nearby? We've got tomorrow.
Yeah, Louisiana and Houston at the Radiance Technologies, and of course, Independence. So the Independence Bowl. Again, I mean, maybe a couple years ago, like last year, this would have been a good one.
Yeah, I feel like Houston's probably going to win just because they likely have more talent, even if they aren't a good team this year. Like Houston has had a good team over the last few years, so there's probably still some lingering of that. Like for a team like a Houston, everything has to fall in place. Like you have to really, it was kind of like the Boise State run of the early 2000s. Like you've got the talent, but you also kind of have to have everything fall in place. And if you're out of conference schedule, like if you don't catch some good breaks on some of these big teams that you have to play, if you're going to get consideration for anything decent, like a team like a Houston, they have to play big teams either in the Big 12 or the SEC or the Pac-12. Like they have to take on big names to have a chance to give themselves a shot. And when you're doing that, you run the risk that you very well may have 4 or 5 losses because you might go and get run, just absolutely run by every one of those big teams that you take on. Like you're rolling the dice that you're going to pick up an upset win and you're going to make a name for yourself. People are going to be like, oh shit, check out Houston this year, like they did. What was it, 2 years ago or last year? Like, where it fell and they did get some of those big upsets. Or then you have a year like this year where they're 7-5 and in the Independence Bowl and probably going to just absolutely spank Louisiana.
Yeah. And, Louisiana's old coach is now down in Florida getting boat raced and signing, not only bowl games, but also getting a top 15 signing class. Old Sun Belt Billy Napier. He might end up being a good coach one day, but he was damn good when he was at Louisiana. He had them winning the Sun Belt, I think, 2 years in a row. And he kind of had him positioned similarly to what Houston or what Cincinnati has been up until recently, like chipping away at the big boys. And I think that they could have easily beat Houston if they still had Napier. But without that, Houston probably has a little more continuity. Houston's favored by a touchdown. I don't. This one I'm going off of just more of like the auxiliary things that are happening around the program, what they've lost over the last 2 to 3 years versus, none of these teams that are in bowl games yet are really on a hot streak. So I don't think that there's a momentum that's really going to be taking a role here. I mean, none of these teams have played in a few weeks, so I don't know how much momentum is actually even legitimate until you get into the top 10 teams. So yeah, I would say Houston probably wins this one just because they're just a little bit more cohesive.
Let's see. That takes us to Wake and Mizzou. I heard good things about Wake all season, but they didn't seem to pick up some of the wins that they needed to pick up throughout the year. But then Mizzou is just always Mizzou. Ever since they came to the SEC, like they had a good couple years there early on, and ever since then, the rest of the SEC has caught up to what Mizzou did well, and they haven't been able to recruit on an elite level to keep up with what the rest of the SEC does. So, and I mean, even in the SEC East, which up until maybe this year, SEC East has been the weaker of the two divisions. Missouri still just couldn't keep up. They couldn't break out of the middle of the pack. I'm gonna go with Wake Forest on this one just because I've watched enough Missouri football I haven't seen a whole lot of Wake Forest. I've heard good things, but they didn't interest me that much that I was going to take time to watch them. But I have watched enough Missouri over the last couple of years, and I don't have a lot of faith in that team, generally speaking, especially if they're going up against solid, like, good competition. If they're going to beat the teams that they should beat, but if it's going to be a tight game or if it's somebody that's equal or even a little bit better, they're not going to. They can't hold their own.
No, and I'm kind of in the similar boat as you are with Wake Forest. I did watch their game against Clemson earlier in the year where it went to overtime, and they could have and likely should have won that game if they just weren't Wake Forest, and just did some of the dumbest shit, like just playing soft zone coverage or prevent defense when you're beating Clemson. I don't understand their football IQ leads me to also question their mentality. And talent-wise, they're more than good enough to beat Missouri. Missouri is a team that has always been kind of just that nagging little brother in the league. And yeah, 100%. The first 2 years they were in the league, they made it to the SEC championship. They won the East. But that was when Florida was way down. And that was the last 2 years of Mark Richt here at Georgia, where there was a reason why he was getting fired. And so in Tennessee was a dumpster fire. South Carolina, this was post Spurrier, or like right at the end of Spurrier. This is when a lot of things were in transition in the East. Perfect opportunity for an unfamiliar team to come in and look like they could make noise for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think Kentucky had hired Stoops yet. They were still
Mm-mm.
kind of in that. Um, oh, I'm trying to remember the name. They had that quarterback that was really good and like set like an NCAA record for most consecutive completed passes without an interception or something like that. Like Kentucky had a good team, but
Mm-hmm.
they even with a good team, they weren't good enough to win the SEC East because they weren't that good. Like they just
No, the East was terrible those 2 years. So even, I mean, somebody has to be at the top, and it just so happened that the team that everybody knew the least about was able to pull a fast one a couple times. But they immediately, quickly settled back down. You know, water always finds its level, and that's where they've been ever since. And they've also been through a bit of a coaching carousel until recently. Their current coach, I forget his name. It's Hinkle, Finkel, Winkle, something like that. Um, and I could be totally off. Don't care because it's Missouri. But they got all the way up to 6-6 this year, and they decided to give him an extension. So, whatever Missouri ball you have grown accustomed to seeing over the last 2 to 3 years, will just nestle in, get cozy because you got more of that coming. Especially when Missouri's best wide receiver just signed with Georgia today through the transfer portal. So they're not getting any better up there. And I don't see any reason why they would beat Wake Forest. Now, this is also everything that Justin and I are saying, especially up to this point, um, is with little to no knowledge of any holdouts, injuries,
oh yeah,
coaching changes, any of
I'm
that stuff.
making all my picks based on like we're coming in like it was the regular season. If there are players who decide they're not playing because they're gonna go to the league or because they're getting ready to transfer, or coaches end up not coaching because they're taking another job somewhere else, any of that stuff, like I don't know.
That
I'm
is
picking it
way
just
too
based
much
on
to keep up with.
yeah. I'm just there's too many games to pick and too much of that shit to try to keep up with for that many. So I'm just going to pick them based on which team do I think is the better team and should win. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of, we got Middle Tennessee State versus San Diego State. Uh, San Diego State is a 6.5 point favorite in this one. I don't really know that much about either team. I've seen MTSU play a couple times over the years because they'll play Mississippi State. I know they're always a scrappy team, but I'm probably gonna say if Vegas thinks San Diego State is almost a touchdown better, they're probably not wrong about that.
Yeah, and that was basically that's pretty much my line of thinking too. When I think of two teams that are never on my radar, but I have respect for because they always seem to have a winning record. If I were trying to find the two most even teams just over my lifetime, and really my football watching lifetime, so a little over 20 years, this is a great bowl. I mean, it's a Hawaii bowl, and you never know who really gives a shit about going that far to paradise in the middle of winter to play a football game. But I've seen Middle Tennessee State upset some teams they have no business being on the field with and being very competitive against vastly more talented squads. And I can say the exact same thing for San Diego State. Even though they play on the West Coast, most of their games are so late at night that I miss them. Um, I still see highlights and things like that. They literally have the same record. They're the same team to me, just being ignorant of both programs this year. And when that happens, yeah, you got to default to Vegas.
Just looking at Middle Tennessee's schedule, they only played Miami this year. Usually they're like uh, punching bag of the ACC and the SEC. Like they'll play a Mississippi State. A lot of times Middle Tennessee State will be the homecoming game for
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi State. Like they'll be the team that goes and gets trounced by Tennessee and Mississippi State and some of the other SEC schools, or they'll play Miami or Clemson, or like they'll get their ass handed to them by some of the big ACC heavy hitters, or even kind of the middle of the pack guys. They're a good homecoming game week or homecoming week game.
Absolutely. I think that game that they beat Miami was one of the 8 turnover games that Miami had this year, where it was just they were setting records on how quickly and how poorly how quickly they could lose and how poorly they could make it look. And so I don't know if Middle Tennessee State is that good this year, because I do agree with you. I remember them coming into Athens for one of our 2 cupcake games of the year. But when they're playing on their level, they can make it interesting, because you don't really know what you're going to get from them. But some of their losses this year have already been to teams that have already played and won in their bowl games. So I don't know how good they are this year. Let's see. What about San Diego State? That's probably a team I know even less about. They lost the season opener to Boise State. Again, Boise State, if I remember correctly, has already played in there. Or we might get to them in a minute. They beat Hawaii. They beat Hawaii. They beat Nevada. They beat Fresno State. They lost to Fresno State. And they lost to UNLV, San Jose State. They lost to Air Force 13-3, if that's going to give us any indicator on this Baylor game tonight. So they lost to some bad teams. They beat some good teams. They're identical. They're fucking identical teams. I got to just side with Vegas. They don't lose money out there very often, and I don't see a big reason why they would put themselves in that much of a hole on a San Diego State team.
All right, I want to run through the next 4 games about as quickly as we possibly can so that we can get to some of the more interesting and engaging games. Let's go New Mexico State Bowling Green. I know jack shit about either one of these. I'm going to go with New Mexico State. And
I'm going to go with Bowling Green, only because they're favored. That's it.
What we got? Georgia Southern and Buffalo.
Now, this one is this one's close to my heart. I actually went to Georgia Southern. If you look over my right shoulder, there's Georgia Southern's football helmet. They beat App State in the final game of the year in overtime, or maybe even double overtime, to win and become bowl eligible. And while becoming bowl eligible, knock App State out of bowl contention. If anybody remembers, earlier this year, App State beat Texas A&M early in the year. And then because they did that, they got College Game Day to come to Boone, North Carolina. I know I just said that momentum is bullshit, but I think Georgia Southern, if there is a 6-6 team with any momentum coming into the bowls, it's going to be them. They have gotten rid of their triple option bullshit, which has plagued us for decades. We air it out now. We have the former head coach from USC, old Coach Helton, and he has earned my trust, and I'm going to be biased as shit. Plus, we're favored by 3.5. Give me the Eagles over Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm going to take Georgia Southern as well. Buffalo had a pretty good program going for a little bit there a few years ago, but it seems to have kind of petered off. Like they seem to have hit whatever peak they were going to hit, and they returned back to earth. So give me Georgia Southern in that one. Memphis and Utah State. Memphis is a 7.5-point favorite. I'm probably going to go with Memphis just because I know they do tend to play a tougher schedule. They get some of the Southern teams that are like they play Tulsa and they play Central Florida. They play Tulane. Like I know none of these are. They play Houston. I know none of these are like big name teams, but in the like middle tier of college football, these are good teams. Like Houston, Tulane, Tulsa. Like none of these teams are slouches that Memphis plays, and so Memphis gets tested regularly, and I don't think Utah State does. So I'm gonna go with Memphis.
I'm going to go with Memphis, and also real quick, everything I said about Middle Tennessee State University, scratch that. I was honestly thinking of Memphis the whole time. So all the good things I said about Middle Tennessee State, apply that to Memphis, because no bullshit. That's honestly the team I was thinking about. They're scrappy as shit.
They're basically interchangeable.
Yeah, San Diego State's going to beat Middle Tennessee, and give me Memphis over Utah State.
All right, then we got the Birmingham Bowl that doesn't have any tennis or any teams from Alabama. It's all Carolina for this one. We got Coastal Carolina versus Eastern Carolina. And what's the line on that? We got Eastern Carolina is favored by 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
Coastal Carolina is coming off a 9-win season, but I don't know who Coastal Carolina actually plays to get those 9 wins. The Carolina School for the Deaf.
I think they beat Georgia Southern.
They beat App State too, or Appalachian State.
Yeah, they beat Georgia Southern by 4. I'm going to go ahead and pick Eastern Carolina. They're kind of the big brother to Coastal Carolina. Coastal is they were a fun story a year or two ago when they had Isaiah Likely at tight end, and they had some NFL players on their roster, and they were, I think, undefeated up until the very last week of last season, and they were kind of becoming the Boise State of the East Coast, and they were interesting to watch. The Chanticleers is their mascot, but I think it was either earlier this year where there was a hurricane bearing down on the southeast, and they didn't delay the game, and it was between Georgia Southern playing at Coastal Carolina. They didn't postpone the game. They didn't make a decision on the game until I think the night before. And so Southern had to get on their buses, drive through the night. There was no hotels open because everybody was evacuated into hotels. Fuck them. They are pieces of shit in my book. They also just lost their coach. I think their coach where did Coastal Carolina's coach go? I think he was in discussion for Georgia Tech. And I can't remember if he took it or not. This is my ignorance coming out, but out of pure spite and hatefulness, give me East Carolina. They might have a worse record, but they are favored, and they're a tier above Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, and say all I really know about Coastal Carolina is they had the 7'5" guy for their basketball team in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago, Taco Fall. The hell of a! I mean, that's like the best name for a dude that's 7'5". He was not athletic at all. Literally the only thing he had going for him was he was 7'5". But
Taco Fall sounds like a resort in Tijuana where you're probably going to get scabies. Just saying.
You can't teach height, is what they say. But I don't think he plays football. Thank God.
No.
And like you said, ECU tends to be. They're like the step up from Coastal. So.
Yeah, and Coastal Carolina plays on a teal field. I'm sorry, I'm just going to pick against any team that's playing on a different colored field. Yeah,
not even blue like Boise State, we couldn't get a real hunter green or something. They have to go with teal.
It's in the green family, but it's fucking disgusting.
But that's the gayest green of all. All right, moving on from that game. Wisconsin and Oklahoma State. Wisconsin seems like an absolute dumpster fire, and Oklahoma State, I don't know that they're that much better, but I just I feel like whatever Wisconsin has been trying to do this year, it's not fucking working. I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with the dog on this one. I'm gonna take Oklahoma State.
I'm surprised OK State is the underdog here by 3.5 to Wisconsin. I mean, I know that Wisconsin just hired Luke Fickell, the old Cincinnati coach that we mentioned a minute ago, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't taken over the team yet. And Wisconsin's 6-6, and they play in the weakest division of the Big Ten. Oklahoma State was actually making some noise early on, and they lost games they shouldn't. They were kind of like the Wake Forest of the Big 12, where it's like if you just didn't do that, you would have a better record. I think they're more talented than Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin, Wisconsin's been in a dark lull post J.J. Watt and Russell Wilson, where they just can't seem to really be that 10-win team and get their shit together.
What was the coach's name? Bielema that left and went to
Brett
Arkansas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when he left to go to Arkansas, it was like everything that he was doing was kind of the backbone of what that program was. And he left, and it didn't sustain. It only lasted for as long as the recruiting classes that he had in place were still there. And as soon as that dried up, then all the talent just dried up with it. It was that was the end of that program, basically.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Brett Bielema is the head coach at Illinois now, and you just saw what the year they had, and I think we'll get to them a little later. Um, yeah, I feel bad for Wisconsin. Like I got no problems with Wisconsin. I like the Badgers as a program, but I just don't think that this year they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna win much. I mean, obviously, much less cover. Guaranteed rate bowl. I don't even know what bowl that used to be or where it is. So I guess go for it, Cowboys.
Let's see. Next game, we've got Central Florida and Duke in the Military Bowl. Duke is favored by 3.
That just seems. I'm starting to really question the odds makers now. I think they're now just putting out these odds so that they can get the opposite betting going.
I was going to say the same thing. I feel like Central Florida has got to be better than Duke. Just looking at their stats, Duke does not put up a whole lot of. They put up more points, or they put up a decent number of points per game, but offensive, like total yardage and wise, they don't seem to put up a whole lot. They have a decent defense, but what's that worth in the NCAA?
I mean, UCF did lose to Navy 17-14, so that hurts them in their second to last game. But they're a good team. I mean, they did lose to East Carolina. That's why I'm picking East Carolina in that earlier game. But UCF has Gus Malzahn as their head coach. They signed a very decent recruiting class. I think that they have some good momentum going on. I think that they're well coached and can challenge teams that they don't have any business challenging. And I think Duke definitely does not fall within that. I think Duke is beneath them. There was a point in time this year where Duke was undefeated. I think that lasted all the way up until week 5. So if you look at their 8-4 record, they went 4-4 to close out the season. They were a 500 team. I can't imagine, unless the odds makers just know something we don't about a key player on UCF holding out. But if I'm just looking at this as a coin toss, I'm taking UCF all day.
Well, and then you talked about Duke getting off to a fast start and then kind of petering out after that. That takes us to the next game, the Liberty Bowl. We got Kansas versus Arkansas. Kansas is another one of those teams that started out fast and then really kind of petered out at the end of the season. Arkansas did not really play up to their expectation this year either. But, I mean, when you make that run through the SEC, like that's tough. All it takes is to lose a couple close games. Like Texas A&M was a close game, and then they got just trounced by Alabama, and then they come back and get trounced even worse by Mississippi State. Like you get 3 just like absolutely deflating losses like that in a row coming into the SEC schedule. Like that can snowball really quick. So I think Arkansas has a very good team. They just did not have a very good year. Whereas Kansas, like they got off to a hot, fluky start, and then they kind of came back down to earth for who you would expect Kansas to be. So I think Arkansas should win this one pretty easily. It's a 3-point spread. I think they cover that easy.
Yeah, I think Kansas. They had the scare of going up 4-0, just like Duke. It was actually the basketball schools, Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, and I think North Carolina, that were all 4-0 at the same time. It's the first time that had ever happened, or in like over 40 years or whatever, or maybe even 100. Don't know. Not here for stats. Or at least I'm not here for correct stats. But they had a scare, obviously, and there were some must wins that they had to get just to be bowl eligible, which for them is a very good year. It was the first time they'd been bowl eligible in years, and they rushed the field when they got to 6-6, when they got a 500 record. I think to them that was good enough. And Arkansas, yeah, they might not have ended with the record that they wanted, but they started the season, and I think even finished the season with the toughest schedule in all of college football. They were the number one team, or they were the team with the number one most difficult schedule, with their out of conference opponents. And expectations were high, but in the second game they went out to BYU and they won. Then where they hiccuped was against like Liberty, losing by 2 points to them. They opened the season with a win over Cincinnati. Cincinnati was coming off of the 2 really good years of freaking playoff berth. And so you started looking at who they had to go up against and what the expectations were of a Texas A&M, Alabama, and so on and so forth, that they had, to come out of that with bowl eligibility, I think says more about the coaching and the talent. Because trust me, if you gave Kansas the same schedule that Arkansas had, they would be 1-11 without a doubt. And I don't even know who that one would be, but I think Arkansas rolls these guys because say what you will about Arkansas maybe not getting up to play a Kansas, Arkansas sure as shit doesn't want a loss to Kansas. They would much rather do whatever it takes just not to lose to Kansas. I don't know how much they give a shit about winning, but the end result would be a win. Give me Coach Pittman. He's not going to have those guys laying a flat one against the Jayhawks.
Next, we've got Oregon versus North Carolina. This is the biggest spread that I have found on one of these bowl games. It's 14.5 favoring Oregon, and that's probably about right.
Yeah, I totally agree with it, and I think that they'll cover. I think North Carolina – no, that was NC State who lost their quarterback. Never mind. But North Carolina laid some of the biggest stinky piles of poo at the end of the year to close out their season that just makes me wonder if they even want to play football anymore. This is how their season ended. And their last 3 games. So this is a trend. Remember their record is 9-4. So they were 9-1 going into this run of games. They have Georgia Tech come to North Carolina. Georgia Tech being one of the worst teams in all of college football the past 5 years, and they lose to them. They lost to Georgia Tech. The next week they have NC State at home again. 2 home games back to back. They lose to NC State in double overtime. Now, NC State's not nearly as bad as Georgia Tech, but when you lose at home to Georgia Tech, you got to fire some people. And then they play Clemson in the ACC championship and just lose by 29 points because obviously. So North Carolina was a 9-1 team at a point, looking at a potential New Year's 6, maybe with some help of other people, a possible playoff bid, and just crash landed, walked out of the plane, and then another plane crashed on the survivors. Like, just the worst ending to a season you can have when you actually had hopes at one point. Oregon all day. They will have a very good time beating the shit out of Tar Heels.
All right, that takes us to a probably more intriguing game. Well, it doesn't take much to be more intriguing than that game. Ole Miss and Texas Tech. Ole Miss is a 3.5-point favorite. This is a December 28th, one of those games.
Yep, next Wednesday in the Tax Act Texas Bowl. So do you think Texas Tech gets up for playing in their own state, or do you think that they would have probably wished to have traveled and maybe they come in a little flat?
I don't think it matters. I think Lane Kiffin is going to get those Ole Miss players up and come into a bowl game and try to just absolutely wipe the floor with whoever they're going to be playing. Because they had some really close games that they probably shouldn't have lost. Like, they had that Bama game and just ended up losing it. Like, we were watching that one. We were standing on the street drinking a beer, watching it on screens on the side of a big truck while we were waiting to go into the Mississippi State Georgia game. Like, that was highly entertaining watching that and standing out with the crowd and everything. But, like, Ole Miss had that and
Yep.
like snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, basically. Like just let Bama take that one out out from under them, and then they followed that up by just getting smacked by Ole Miss, and then Mississippi State beat them in a tight, like really good game. I feel like the way they closed that season out, after being as good as they had been up to that point, I think Lane Kiffin's going to get in these guys' asses, and he's going to be like, we're going to go into this bowl, and we're going to prove to everybody that we are exactly who we were 4 weeks ago. In week 9, we're not that team that dropped 3 straight at the end of the season and looked bad. We're going to go in here and we're going to leave no doubt. Like, we're coming back next year, and we are going to be the cream of the crop in the SEC West. Because I think they have a chance to do it. Like, I think Kiffin's a good coach. Yep. I think LSU isn't as good as what they ended up finishing. I think Bama is probably going to take another half step back or so, and it's the SEC West is going to be ripe for the picking for some team to step up and start to take control over some of those games. And I think Ole Miss has the opportunity. Kiffin, the way Kiffin coaches those teams, I think he could do it. And that hurts as a Mississippi State.
Yeah. No, I can feel your pain coming through that, because I have to say the same thing about some of the teams that I really hate. Yeah, losing the last 3 and losing 4 out of the last 5 is no way that you want to be remembered when you were doing so well and you were top 10 for the majority of the year. I agree, though. I think Kiffin's a good coach. But to me, Ole Miss is just one of those teams that is it's the prototypical team. It's like the perfect settings for a lot of holdouts for bowl games. Ole Miss, the kind of players, and I don't know the players, obviously, but I can only speak on the players' mentality based on the coach's demeanor. And Lane Kiffin, I think I might have mispronounced his name earlier, but Kiffin he's still growing up, even though he's older than both of us by a number of years, but he still is slowly gaining maturity, but he's still an asshat enough to where I think he still gets some of those players that is a little me before the team kind of a thing. So I could easily see in this bowl game, just because it's Ole Miss under Kiffin, that they have some opt-outs at key positions, maybe even transfer portal guys that just say, fuck it, I'm not playing in the bowl. I could see where Texas Tech wins this just because I didn't have Ole Miss going 1-4 in the final 5. I just didn't see it coming, and I don't have faith in them. They haven't earned faith from me back yet, so I'll take the opposite in this one. Uh-oh. You be muted. You are muted, sir. Can't hear you.
Oh, my bad. I'm an idiot. I said, moving on to the next game. I don't know that it's necessarily very intriguing. Syracuse, Minnesota. I really don't know much about either of them. I know Minnesota is usually a not terrible team, and I know Syracuse is usually a not great team. This is a 9.5 point line in favor of Minnesota, and I'm probably going to trust the odd makers on that one and go with Minnesota, just because I do think they typically have a pretty good football team. I know they're not going to win the Big Ten anytime soon, but they seem to have a competitive football team.
They got a better coach. They're rowing the boats and all that stuff up there in Minnesota. Syracuse also strikes me similar to Wake Forest, where I think, but instead of they could have won more games, they struck me similar to Wake Forest, where I was like, I can't believe they're in this game. And holy shit, they actually won a few of them. So I think that they kind of played above their fighting weight for a lot of the year. And Minnesota sets up kind of similar for that. But because this is not going to be on a college campus, this is going to be not even in a football stadium. It's one of those bastardizations of a football game. They're going to hold it in Yankee Stadium, which just makes everything super weird. I don't see Syracuse. I think they're going to be too wide-eyed and, and awestruck that they're playing in such a big city that Minnesota just comes in and handles them, and they row their boats all over left field, which I guess would be the end zone in this case, and they end up beating Syracuse.
You don't think Syracuse carries some big home field advantage with playing in New? Sorry,
No.
There's no way. There's no way.
They're gonna be like, gee golly, these buildings are taller than 4 floors. Woo-hoo.
I don't think Syracuse carries a home field advantage even when they play at Syracuse. So
no, I mean, if we're talking a basketball game, I think this would be a fantastic basketball game.
I'd pay money to see that one.
Yeah, but if we're still talking about football being played outdoors on a baseball field, give me Minnesota.
Well, let's be moving on to the next game. We got Oklahoma and Florida State. This was another big line game. We got Florida State with a 9.5-point favorite. This is the Cheez-It Bowl.
And just for that fact that it's the Cheez-It Bowl, I will not be watching this game. I will not watch the same Cheez-It commercial played 3 times every commercial break where I woke up feeling cheesy, coach, and cheese. Everybody knows the commercial. If you watch any ESPN college football, I swear to God, Cheez-It used to have a series of, 9 or 10 commercials with a little cheese wheel. They used to switch it up. And then I guess they just fired their entire marketing department and they said, we'll just roll with that one commercial, that one repetitive, stupid commercial. And we're just going to stick with that for 5 years. It's been 5 years. They've just been running this one damn commercial. I like the teams. I hate the sponsor. Make more commercials, you chip-making bastards.
Who do you think is going to win?
I think Florida State's going to roll all over Oklahoma. I think Florida State is a team that is ascending and ascending quickly. Oklahoma is a team with a first-year coach that's been a lifelong defensive coordinator out at Clemson. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing yet. Florida State was where Oklahoma is now 3 years ago. But they have really put it together this year. I think that that game could get really fucking ugly, to be honest with you. I think Florida State, if they come in with the full lineup of players that they've had all year, they are going to really embarrass Oklahoma. And I'm here for it.
Coming into the season, I thought Oklahoma was going to be a lot better than what they ended up being. And I don't see any reason why they won't continue to let me down. Not that I had anything writing on them being good, but that was my Big 12 pick, and then they just kind of fell apart and made me look dumb. But fortunately, everybody else on this show picked Texas, and they didn't do a whole hell of a lot better. So I'm going to go with Florida State, and Oklahoma, better luck next year. Speaking of Texas, the Alamo Bowl, we've got Texas as a 4-point favorite over Washington.
That's odd to me.
And that's more or less going to be a home game for Texas.
Yeah. They're playing in San Antonio. I know San Antonio is not right next door to Austin. It's probably a 2-hour drive, but
yeah, it's 2 hours Texas. For Texas football fans. That's next door.
Texas is the school of that state. Like, say what you will about Texas Tech and TCU and all the
and that's not
schools.
A bad drive either. Those highways out there are 80-mile-an-hour speed limit, and everybody does 95. That's it. You can make it from Austin to San Antonio fucking quick.
Yeah, and I'm totally speaking out of my ass. I've never made that drive, so it might not be 2 hours. It could very well be 4, but they'll make it in 2 because they're excited to go play the Huskies of Washington. Which, to me, I don't know. Washington is a good team. I was surprised that they beat Oregon, and I think it was pretty convincingly as well, if I remember correctly. Let me pull up their record. 37-34, so maybe not convincingly, but they went to Oregon and beat them, who is was a top. I think they were ranked 6th at the time. let's see, who did they lose to? They have some inexplicable losses, like one to Arizona State, and the other one to where the hell? Oh, UCLA. UCLA is a good team. That doesn't bother me. So they have one bad loss. Texas, however, I think they underwhelmed all year. I think they peaked at a 1-point loss to Alabama. I don't know what Texas's best win was, and if that would even compare to UCLA or not UCLA, but Oregon and the other teams that Washington beat. So it's 20th ranked Texas against the 12th ranked Huskies. I know it's the Alamo Bowl. I know it'll likely be a Texas favored crowd, but
I don't know how much that matters.
I don't either, especially in a bowl game. And
Especially
this one's on Thursday. And this is on Thursday, the 29th. So it's far enough away from Christmas, just early enough before New Year's, where people are probably going to want to get the fuck out of their houses, make some travel plans, go to somewhere warmer. I think Washington shows up to this game, and I think that they fucking upset Texas. I can't even believe that's an upset.
Yeah, I can't either. Texas, I mean, I'm looking through their schedule. Like, Texas's signature win is probably trouncing Oklahoma 49-0. Like, otherwise, they didn't win any games that were like spectacular wins. I mean, I guess they beat Kansas State, but I don't know that I think Kansas State was actually, top 15 type of a team. I think they just won the games that they. At the end of the day, we talk about it with the NFL slate every week, like with the Vikings. Like, all you can do is win the game that you're playing this week, and I think that's kind of how Kansas State was. Like, I don't think Kansas State was necessarily a good team. I think they just showed up on Saturday and they won the game that they were playing, and then so I don't really think Texas beating Kansas State was a huge accomplishment. I think that was just sort of what a normal football fan should have probably expected. Yeah. So maybe their signature win is absolutely drubbing Oklahoma, but other than that, yeah, they mostly just rode off the coattails of only losing by 1 to Alabama. And as the season progresses, we also find out that that's not a Alabama of 2-3 years ago. That's a Alabama at
on
about
a
half a tick down. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, Texas's best player on their entire team, Bijan Robinson, their running back, declared for the NFL draft. So I don't expect him to be in this bowl game.
Yeah, and low probability of him playing.
And without that, I don't know what weapons Texas has to really scare Washington. I think there wasn't really a good team in the Big 12. Now watch me say that and watch TCU just steamroll Michigan, which I highly doubt. But I think you could have had 1 to 2 good teams out of the Big 12 if, you took Brett Venables and made him defensive coordinator for Texas, and then took the running back from Kansas State and put him on Texas to have a 2-headed monster out of the backfield. You would have to take some beat parts from other teams and cram them all into Texas to have one good Big 12 team. I'm not a believer in that conference at all, top to bottom, and I'm not going to start with the Alamo Bowl. Give me the Huskies. I think that they win this and cover by a touchdown.
Yeah, I'm going to take Washington on that too. To win outright, not just to cover. Next, we've got the Duke's Mayo Bowl that Duke is not playing in, which could not disappoint me more. We've got Maryland versus NC State. This one is a push. Maryland has the younger Tagovailoa.
Mm-hmm.
And NC State is coming off an 8-4 season and finished number 23. Not that finishing in the upper 20s means a whole lot at the end of the season, but it is what it is. They still get to claim, rah, we finished top 25.
Yep. It's good for a coach, put on his resume, maybe get some bonus money. But I think that this game would have been 3.5 points for NC State if they didn't just lose their quarterback to the transfer portal, who was the best quarterback in the transfer portal this portal season. And I think that is significant. Maryland pushed Ohio State to the brink If you look at their score, their game against Ohio State at Maryland, the final score doesn't indicate how close that game was. Maryland could have easily won it, but that doesn't let me start to get lost in the sauce thinking Maryland's good. That just means that I don't think Ohio State's that great. But NC State, I do think, is a good team, but not having their quarterback's really going to hurt them. I got to go with Maryland only because of continuity. I think the team that loses the least amount of players and has the most amount of starters that they had the entire year show up for a bowl game is vastly in a better spot to win. I think when you start plucking starters off of lineups, you take the season and you throw it in the trash, because all this is now is an extended early practice for next year. And nobody, unless you're a diehard fan of that program, somebody like us looking from the outside in, I don't know anything about NC State's backup quarterback situation. And I don't know what kind of rapport he has with the receiving core or the center or the offensive coordinator or whoever the play caller is. So there's too many unknowns on NC State's side, and I feel like I know a little bit more. So there's a higher comfort level with Maryland. Duke's Mayo Bowl, that one is played in Charlotte, if I remember correctly. It's played in the Carolina Panthers Stadium. So NC State's probably a little closer, but I'm taking Maryland on that one.
Yeah, I'm going to take Maryland on this game as well.
Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl is next. Pitt versus UCLA. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. So they can't just say Frosted Flakes Sun Bowl or Kellogg's Sun Bowl. It has to be like, is there a Toucan Sam fucking sarsaparilla bowl or some shit? Like, what are we doing here? This is ridiculous.
We need to get the Toucan Sam sponsorship for this show.
Hell yeah. Follow your nose.
So Pitt, UCLA.
I don't like Pitt. I don't like Pitt. I think UCLA, if UCLA by 4 is what they have, it's on Friday on the 30th at 2 p.m. It's a forgotten time. No one's really going to be watching it. But I think UCLA, they have a better coach. They have a better team. They're just overall better. I can't believe that this one isn't a spread similar to the Oregon game. I think UCLA wins this by double digits.
Yeah, the fact that they've got this at 3.5 is kind of odd. I figured UCLA would be favored by quite a bit more than that, and I don't see any reason to think otherwise. Just looking at this game, unless the odds makers know something about UCLA that we don't, I'm going to lean towards UCLA at least by a touchdown.
Now, where is the Sun Bowl played? Is that out west?
Oh, hell.
I was thinking it's either Florida or it's in Arizona or New Mexico, somewhere in the desert. El Paso, Texas.
I don't think it's Florida.
Yeah, El Paso, Texas, in an outdoor stadium is what it looks like on ESPN. Okay. Yeah. Pitt has to travel further. UCLA is the vastly better team. Unless they just have a lot of opt-outs I'm not aware of. UCLA wins this one freaking easy. And now we start to get into bowl games with names that I know and teams that I'm familiar with and matchups where both teams are ranked. If you're looking at the next one that I'm looking at, the next one is the Gator Bowl with the number 21 Notre Dame Fighting Irish taking on the 19th ranked South Carolina upset fucking Wizards of the Year, Gamecocks. And this one's an interesting one because
I tend to have very little faith in Notre Dame in a bowl game against an SEC team, but I also have very little faith in South Carolina, except that, like you said, I mean, they kind of made their name for themselves this year, upsetting teams that they probably shouldn't have beat. They took down Kentucky, they took down Texas A&M, they took down
Tennessee and Clemson.
Clemson, those are some impressive wins that kind of make me think maybe South Carolina is actually not a bad football team. Like they might actually be pretty good. I mean, their stats look pretty good. So
Yep. And I'm a fan of Shane Beamer. I think he's one of the good ones. He looks like he gets it. He has fun when it's time to have fun. You could tell he's an hard ass when it's time to get the most out of his players. I respect him as a coach. I like him. As far as the history of South Carolina coaches, he's far and away my favorite that they've ever had. South Carolina is a rival of mine, and I tend to not cheer for them. But when it gets into bowl season, those borders get redrawn a little bit. I don't hate South Carolina, mainly because we beat them this year, and so it looks good on us if they do well. Notre Dame, I'm so over their bullshit. I've been over Notre Dame since I was a kid. I mean, I got friends now that have been Notre Dame fans for over 40 years just because the movie Rudy, or they went into a Catholic church once and they like the windows, and so they identify as a Notre Dame fan. The Notre Dame fandom is one of the most overrated things in all of sport. For the amount of people that have never even been on the campus, couldn't even tell you what state it's in. And there's just so much pompousness surrounding Notre Dame that South Carolina is a little dirty, gritty football team, and in a state that's the little brother to Georgia, and I like that. I dig South Carolina this year. This iteration of South Carolina, I respect them, and I like Beamer ball, Shane Beamer. I'm going to pick his team just because of him.
I just never trust Notre Dame in a bowl game against an SEC team. I don't. It never seems to work out well.
No.
So just based strictly on the history of it, I'm going to take South Carolina. We can blow by this one. Ohio, Wyoming.
Wyoming. They are a decent little team. I think that's where Josh Allen came from.
Yeah.
And they were fun when they were in 1AA. In Ohio, who the fuck are they? So, as you can tell, I'm shitting on all Ohio teams. There's a theme here.
Mark would appreciate that.
I don't give a shit that Ohio is favored by 1 point. It's the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl. Are there just going to be shirtless dudes spraying each other down with Axe body spray, saying "bruh" the whole time?
There's going to be a lot of ass sex in the bathrooms going on.
They don't even have stall doors. They're just perforated. It's just going to be bubble wrap, and everybody's just going to be playing with it, and there's just going to be a hole cut in the middle for obvious reasons. Yeah, Wyoming. Give me whatever their mascot is to beat Ohio Bobcats. Oh, man.
I know nothing about either of them. It's a push. I'll take Ohio just to be a contrarian. And that way one of us took each, and one of us will be right. Tennessee, Clemson. Now, this is the Orange Bowl. I don't like Clemson, I guess is what it kind of comes down to.
Yeah.
I think Clemson's in a down year. I don't think Clemson is as good as that 11-2 record would indicate. I thought so. Hooker was my Heisman pick at the beginning of the season, and he had an excellent year. Aside from a couple hiccups, which one of those hiccups was Tennessee lost to a team that Clemson also lost to. They both got knocked down by South Carolina. Tennessee played well against Georgia, all things considered. I mean, I feel like Tennessee's probably the team that's better built for this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with Tennessee.
All righty. Well, I couldn't think of two better teams to be in the Orange Bowl, because holy shit, the amount of orange that these two fan bases just shower on themselves and call it game day is disgusting. Orange is the worst color in all of sport. But if you remember back to the Tennessee South Carolina game, they were playing their alternate unis. Tennessee was, and they were carbon copy ripoffs of Clemson's orange helmet, white logo. It was fucking hideous. It was hideous then. It's hideous when Clemson does it. For these two teams to be in the Orange Bowl, I don't even want to watch it because it's going to break my TV because I have a setting on there that has an orange limit and it's going to clearly break it. Like the Cheez-It Bowl, I probably won't be able to watch this one for those reasons and those reasons only. But Tennessee, I think if they had Hendon Hooker, I would pick him in a heartbeat. I don't think it would even be that entertaining because I don't respect Clemson. I used to, but Dabo has made that team into a circus. But with them losing Hendon Hooker, their offense really only being 11 plays, not really having that great of a defense, Clemson's DJ Ukulele already going into the transfer portal, so he's not going to play in this game. They have a better backup than DJ, which I think if you would have started their backup the whole season, they would probably be undefeated because they play in such a shit conference. I think Clemson wins this, and I think that it will be a false result. I think too many people, as a result of that, will shit on Tennessee a little harder than they should. I think Tennessee is a good team, and they're going to be much better going forward. And I think that a Clemson win will allow the ESPN talking head types to say Clemson's back and they're going to be a shoe-in for the playoff next year because of how they ended, and that's also going to be false. So I think that everyone gets let down in this. I think Clemson wins, and everybody has the wrong outcome on both teams.
I like it. All right, we're getting into
Iowa and Kentucky. Or no,
Bama, Kansas State.
Yeah, let's do that one.
See, this one I have a bad feeling about. Bama's favored by 6.5. I feel like there's a good chance that Kansas State could actually win this. Bama tends to not show up unless they're in a potential to make a championship game. Like if it's just a good bowl game, they don't show up. And I mean, the Sugar Bowl is a good bowl game, but they're not playing for a championship, so they're not going to care. It's just every year that Bama is not playing for a chance at a championship, I'm like, oh, Saban's going to get these guys fired up, and they're going to come out there and they're going to just smack the ever-loving shit out of whoever it is they play, and to try to make a point that, hey, we should have been in it. And it never happens. They don't show up if they're not contending for that championship. So I don't see any reason. I don't know that Kansas State is better than Alabama. I just don't think Alabama's going to make a better effort in this game than Kansas State is going to. This is a bellwether game for Kansas State, whereas it's a not going to show up game for Alabama.
100%. Everything you said. I did all of that. This has Alabama, Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl and Alabama, Utah in the Sugar Bowl written all over it. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, just go on YouTube and watch those games. 2 years where Alabama wasn't playing for a natty, and they let their spoiled, entitled bitch assness take over and ooze all over the field. Like a puppy pissing in the corner, just kind of puddled up over there and made everybody disgusted and gross and wanted to not ever watch it again. They give up on themselves. I think they've already had like double-digit kids leave in the transfer portal this year. They can't hold on to talent. They're going to be overhauling their coaching staff from the coordinator position. Alabama could very easily be 8-4. Instead of 10-2. They're not a good team. They won't show up for this. Kansas State is a better team than Alabama. If not for the whole year, they will be on this night. And I can't even say night. When was the last time, or how many times is the Sugar Bowl held at noon, which is actually 11 in the morning local? Nope. Alabama will so not be up for this game. They can't even give a shit. I think Kansas State beats them by the spread that they have for Alabama. I think it's going to be a total flip.
Yeah, I do too.
And I'm going to love every freaking second of it too.
There's just Alabama doesn't just not show up for those games. Like they almost actively don't try. It's embarrassing. Like as a SEC fan, I want to see the SEC show up to bowl games and just smack folks around.
Yeah.
And they don't do that. It's so disappointing. Like
If it ain't about them, it ain't about anybody in their minds, and they don't like they might as well just this is the prototypical. This is an extended practice for next year, because now they just signed the number 1 overall class, one of the best signing classes of all time. I wonder what Saban's going to say when other coaches start saying that he bought his entire team like he did with A&M. It won't happen because he's a hypocrite. He's had his moment in the sun. It's time for Saban to leave the sport. What else? How much more do you fucking want? I'm very negative against Alabama for a lot of obvious reasons, but none more so than what you just said, that when they are out there to represent the SEC, they just don't show up.
Well, speaking of somebody that does tend to represent the SEC well, at least in football, their basketball team, we won't talk about them, but UK versus Iowa. Now, this is the Music City Bowl, and this is going to 100% be a UK home game. For anybody who's not aware of the geography of that area, that's about a 2.5, 3-hour drive due south. So, and Kentucky fans travel well anyway. Kentucky fans really, really, really love Nashville. Like, almost unhealthily so. Weird. But yeah, they will pack Nashville out for the entire weekend. And it's going to be all UK. And I just don't think Iowa's the 2-point favorite in this, but I think Kentucky has a better team. I think Kentucky has a better offense, and I think Kentucky has a comparable defense. Like if Kentucky can get that running game going, that opens everything else up. And the way that those backs run the ball, I think it matches up well against Iowa. Like the teams that Iowa doesn't do well against tend to overpower them. And Kentucky has the backs that they could do that if they commit to doing that. And I think Stoops will be smart about this, and like he'll go smash mouth. Like we're gonna knock them we're gonna punch them in the mouth and put them on their heels and push the game from there. And then their defense just has to be serviceable because Iowa's not an offensive team by any means.
No. I agree. I think Kentucky has the better team. I think Kentucky can win this game. But I understand why Iowa is favored. And I think a little bit is for betting purposes, betting contrarianness. But also Iowa has a top 5 defense. I think they might even have a top 2 defense. Now, granted, they play in a pretty crappy division, but if they can hold Kentucky to little to no points, this could get interesting. If that doesn't happen, Kentucky runs away with this, and Nashville will be painted blue the whole weekend. And good on them. You know, just out of my SEC bias, I'm going to choose Kentucky.
Do we want to do the playoff games, or do we want to come back to those?
We'll come back to those.
Yeah, so there's 4 other day after New Year bowls that we can look at, and then we'll swing back around and finish it out with the playoff games. The first one we got is the noon game, the ReliaQuest Bowl, whatever the fuck that is. But that's Mississippi State versus Illinois. We were talking about what Brett Bielema earlier. We gave our tribute to the late Mike Leach a couple weeks ago. This is even on the line from Vegas. I don't think Mississippi State is better than Illinois, but I think Mississippi State is going to have more to play for. and I think there's a lot to be said for that. The emotional investment in, we talked about this stuff at the beginning of the show yesterday, like the camaraderie, the
Mhm.
relationships, uh, the non-measurables that come from sports. Having somebody die in the locker room, especially when it's somebody like a Mike Leach. Like, I mean, he is the heart of his programs. Like, his team is an extension of Mike Leach. And to lose a guy like that, I think the non-measurable type stuff that goes on inside of a player is going to override any of the on the field measurable type things in this game. And Mississippi State is going to come out just playing at a level that otherwise shouldn't be possible for them.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely hope that that's the case. Um,
Like, you're going to see Will Rogers complete passes that you would, like, you would think he's the second coming of Brady or something. Like, I feel like it's going to be one of those things. Like, there are going to be things that happen in this game that in a normal game you'd be like, holy shit, how did that even happen? But because of the emotional investment that these guys are going to have in it, like, it's just going to be like, things are going to fall.
yeah, I think Illinois is set up for, they had a good year, especially for Illinois. They had a damn good year. I think they are set up for a big disappointment in this bowl game because of everything you said. I'll take Mississippi State. I don't have anything else to say as far as like by how much or what do I think's gonna what do I think the score is gonna be or anything like that. I think Bielema will have the boys up and ready to play, but Illinois is kind of like Iowa, where they play a little bit more old school, you know, slow game. Where Mississippi State is we'll put 21 points up on you in 5 plays, that kind of a thing. And I think if they're able to do that early, they will catch Illinois off guard and put them on their heels early on. That I think everything sets up perfectly for everything that Justin said as far as the holy shit plays will then start to just spill over and hopefully on repeat because I think that will be a good and entertaining. That's a game I'll be watching for sure because I expect there to be some really cool moments in it.
Let's see, Tulane USC. We get to see the Heisman winning USC quarterback. Well, maybe I'm assuming we'll see him go against how did Tulane finish 16? And I know Tulane's not bad, but I can't imagine them being a top 20 team.
This is one of the more odd bowl matchups because they did win their conference and they did it by beating UCF, which at the time was an upset, if I remember correctly, because UCF had beaten Tulane earlier in the year. Wait a minute. I could have sworn that was the case. Did they not? Oh, no. Yeah. Tulane beat South Florida. Yeah, UCF beat Tulane 38-31 back in early November. And then Tulane comes out and throttles UCF in the conference championship. I think it's because they're conference champions and USC is not a playoff team. And they're the second best team in the Pac-12. I think it's more conference winner / at large plays the second ranked team, and I think that's the only way you can get a matchup like this because it just doesn't fucking make sense. I would be very curious what the sports nerds have to say about how many times Tulane and USC have ever faced each other. I would imagine it's in single digits, even with the possibility that this is contest number 1. I could also totally be not surprised by this is their 58th meeting because they used to be rivals in 1912. But I've never seen this matchup before. And, USC should blow them out of the water. I know that they have the same record. USC is only favored by 2. Maybe their Heisman winning douchebag quarterback is more injured and still going to be too injured for the game. I don't know, but he's a young player, so it's not like he's opting out for anything. He's going to be back next year no matter what, so I imagine he plays. I just don't know, like, I don't know if he like has the room on his fingernails to write "fuck Tulane" because he doesn't have enough fingers for all the letters that spell out Tulane. Because Utah, it works, you know, it's like it's pretty cute that way. But he'll figure it out. Maybe he'll use his toes. But I hope Tulane wins, but I am not ballsy enough to make that pick. I think that, you know, Coach Riley, he hasn't really shown up in postseason games either. He has a little bit of a track record there. Tulane, fuck it, I'm picking Tulane. This would be the most entertaining bowl game of the year if Tulane comes out and smokes USC.
You got some brass clackers on you there, buddy. I just can't make that pick. I agree with you. It would be highly entertaining, but I just can't see USC losing to Tulane. And another team I can't see losing to the team they're playing against is LSU, Purdue. I guess Purdue's okay, but man, these are even LSU on a down year. These are completely different caliber programs and teams.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way this one. I guess the spread is 14.5, and that's probably about right. Like LSU is probably going to trounce them. I tell you what, there is a world where I could see Purdue covers, but I don't see there being any chance that they win.
I agree with you. You know, I watched LSU's last game in person, and I got to say, their backup quarterback, Nussmeier, or whatever his name is, that dude can fling it. And I don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to be healthy enough to play in the bowl game. I've heard that he's planning on it, but I mean, if he's healthy enough to go, sure, anything can happen, you know, as far as like him playing a full game. And if that happens, Purdue doesn't stand a chance. I would be, and it's only because he's so young that it's like, yeah, you know, there's no sense in creating a quarterback controversy for no reason. So if he's able to go at all, you let him go. But here's a note that I think will be talked about a lot during the game, because I think LSU will win, and I think they'll win comfortably. And I think there will be a lot of downtime during the game where the cameras start panning around for secondary and third tier stories to talk about to fill the gaps in between LSU just beating the shit out of Purdue. And one of those that will be looked at repeatedly throughout the game will be the fact that Drew Brees is coaching Purdue, which most people go, well, what? Okay, explain. Well, obviously Drew Brees went to Purdue. He's an alum there, but he's also beloved in the state of Louisiana. He is a literal saint in that state. He can do no wrong except for coach against LSU. So it could be interesting what LSU fans turn the Citrus Bowl into when chastising and booing and looking at Drew Brees as the enemy. I'm here for that. Now, I don't know if he's head coaching Purdue, but I did hear that he's on the coaching staff and he will be on the sidelines calling plays for Purdue, which that's really the only interesting line in this game. LSU shouldn't struggle against Purdue. You know, it's a Citrus Bowl. It's a decent name bowl, but I don't think Purdue's going to be able to match up against LSU's athletes. You know, they are a damn good team. And yet again, another Cheez-It sponsored bowl. The what is it with this company? Start making commercials and stop sponsoring so many football games. I guess the granddaddy of them all, unless you have anything to say about Drew Brees shining his or showing his head post fake lightning strike commercial that blew up in his face. Something tells me LSU fans will have plenty to say about Drew Brees doing a terrible marketing job trying to go viral. Anyway, Justin, you're muted, but do you have anything to say about that?
No, I didn't have anything. Yeah, the LSU fandom and how they respond to Drew Brees could be interesting. It could be literally the only thing there is to talk about that game because otherwise it's just going to be a trouncing. Let's wrap it up with the Rose Bowl, and then we'll get into the playoffs. Penn State versus Utah. I don't know much about Penn State. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them this year. Utah seems to have a strong team, and just based on that little bit that I know about Utah, I'm gonna lean that direction just because I don't really know what Penn State is.
So Penn State is a good team that kind of went under the radar only because they're in the same division. I'm pretty sure same conference, and I'm pretty sure same division as Ohio State and Michigan, which are their only two losses. They beat everybody else on their schedule, and so they kind of just got removed from the conversation all year long. You know, after once you get into November and they already had their two losses to the two best teams in the conference, like they just didn't matter anymore, even though they were beating, shutting people out and winning by 45 points, which is just bizarre that happens to a team. And Utah is the Cinderella, story. Like they are the Pac-12 winners. They did beat USC. They did it twice, as a matter of fact. And they're well coached. I don't know that much more about Penn State to really make a play on how I think they match up with Utah. I think that this is going to be a very evenly matched matchup. This might be one of the best bowl games out of the whole slate as far as talented teams with depth, good coach. It's obviously the Rose Bowl. I think I'm going to just fall into like some old boomerisms and just be like, I can't wait to just watch the game. But I saw Utah last. I can't remember last time I saw Penn State. Utah looked really fucking good against USC. They came out slow, but they ended it strong. I think that could happen again. I'm going to go with the Utes. Sorry, Mark Claire.
Yeah, I'm on board with you on that one. That takes us into the marquee games of the year. We get to roll back to the New Year's Eve games. We've got in the Fiesta Bowl, TCU and Michigan. Michigan's a 7.5-point favorite.
Yeah. I was never a believer in TCU all year. And I picked against them probably 5 or 6 times, which is half of the season for anybody that's keeping track. And they proved me wrong every time, which isn't that significant. I've been proven wrong almost 5 to 10 times a week when it comes to football this year, because I guess what the fuck do I know? And I'm going to pick against them again. I don't think that they can match up against the athleticism that Michigan has. I think Michigan has come a long way from the fucking circus shit show they were 3 to 5 years ago when Coach Harbaugh was taking his shirt off and taking his team to Europe and to the pyramids and doing summer workout camps in the South, trying to he was so weird. And his offense wasn't clicking. It was a dumpster fire. Michigan fans, hey, if you're honest, you all remember when you were begging for him to get out of, to get out of Ann Arbor. He took a pay cut to stay, and then Eureka, all of a sudden they are now good. It makes no sense to me. I don't hate Michigan by any means. They're just, if you took a snapshot of them 5 years ago and then looked at them now, you wouldn't recognize them. And I think that they have something going. They have momentum that has been proven over now a couple of years. TCU is a little bit more of a flash in the pan. They remind me a lot of Cincinnati last year and maybe Notre Dame in earlier years, where they were just the shiniest thing that didn't have as many losses as other good teams that were probably better than them. Even though they didn't win their conference, they were just like, well, fuck, we got to put somebody in. So I guess throw TCU in there. So I don't feel great about them. And I don't think that TCU makes an idiot out of me this time, like they have all year long. I'm going to go with the Wolverines.
I think Michigan has a legit defense, and a common theme for Big 12 teams going into bowl games is anytime a Big 12 team goes up against a team like from the SEC or the Big 10 that has a really legit defense, Big 12 teams always have those high-powered offenses. The Big 12, for a number of years, it was always just a running joke that nobody played any defense in the Big 12 whatsoever. It was all air raid all day, every day, and the defenses shouldn't even bother stepping on field. It was basically just whoever had the ball last was who was going to win. Every time one of these Big 12 high-octane offenses came up against a Big 10 or an SEC team that had a legit defense, they would get completely smothered out. And I think Michigan has a legit defense. And I think they're going to do that to TCU. Like I don't think TCU has a chance in this. They might get out to a hot start and have a good first quarter. After that, it's going to be all Michigan.
Yes, indeed.
And that takes us to your game.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State and Georgia.
This is a game, and this is more than anything a matchup between two teams that I've wanted ever since I was in college. For over 20 years, to have Ohio State and Georgia face off. And years where Georgia was, and if the 4-game playoff had existed, we would have been in it easily, like back in 07 and 2012, and I think even in 2005, not in 2003, but anyway, 2002, 2005, and a handful of other years where Ohio State was the darling of college football. It was either them or USC. That was, people said, before we want Bama, it was we want Ohio State. Well, we finally fucking got them. And I'm glad we got them at the time that we're playing them now and not back in 2007, because we would have probably gotten fucking smoked. But I think Ohio State belongs in the playoff, unlike TCU. I just honestly think that there's nobody else that you could legitimately put in there. So I have no problem with TCU being in the playoff, but I think Ohio State is talented enough. I think that if they had played up to their skill set, they would have beaten Michigan. But I don't think that Ryan Day is a good coach. I agree with a lot of what's been said about him, and that is that he's a guy that was born on third base thinking he hit a triple. He had an embarrassing showing in signing day in the class that he recruited for a team that is perennially as good as Ohio State has been. I think he is the quintessential definition of underachievement, and I don't think that stops on New Year's Eve. I think with the coaching staff that Georgia has, now that I got a little bit of my shit talk about Ohio State out of the way, I think with the coaching staff that Georgia has, we stand to keep them all going forward for another year. We have reloaded and gotten our new freshmen up to speed faster than even I thought. At the beginning of the year, I would not have put us in this position. I would have put Alabama in this position over us. I would have put maybe even Tennessee in front of. I thought that Georgia was going to take a step back. I thought that Stetson Bennett coming back was not a good thing. I thought we would have lost 2 or 3 quarterbacks by now. They all have stuck it out. So I've been surprised at how well Georgia has performed and played this season. I wasn't surprised when they struggled against Missouri. I didn't like it, but I wasn't surprised. They had a couple of hiccups earlier in the year, but I think that as the season went on, they got better, and they play to their opponent. They don't blitz the quarterback to sack them. They play very different game plans and very different schemes based on their opponent. They play to win the game, not to just show how well they can play this style of football. They're multifaceted. They can play very different styles of defense and offense. They have totally moved away from the running game when they have to. They've thrown it when they've needed to, and they've just sat on the ball running it when they're ready to just milk the clock. I think Georgia is at its peak. This is yet another heyday of Georgia football. The first one I wasn't even alive for, and I don't think it stops in Atlanta on New Year's Eve. I think Ohio State will make it closer than what a lot of Georgia fans think it will be. I don't think Georgia's winning by 14 points, like a lot of the Georgia fan base. I think Ohio State is legit good enough to go over the top of us. We have some weaknesses in the secondary, and that's Ohio State's strength. I think that this will be a much closer game. I could easily see this being a 38-33 type of game. Dogs win, and then go on to the Natty for a rematch against Michigan, a rematch of last year's Orange Bowl. We can talk about that after you give your take. You are muted.
See, this is what happens when my phone keeps going off. I think the 4 best teams in college football this year were Georgia, Michigan, Bama, Ohio State, in that order. You can't very well let the college football playoff be Georgia versus Ohio State and Michigan versus Bama. The rest of the college football world would absolutely lose their shit. So you had to put TCU in, and then it had to be Ohio State over Bama for the 4th spot. That's the only way they could do it, and not just have an absolute mutiny on their hands. With that being said, of those 4 teams, Bama and Ohio State are on down years. I don't think Ohio State is, and it's the coaching stuff. I don't think Ohio State is what Ohio State was 2-3 years ago. I don't think Ohio State is going to fare very well against Georgia. I think Georgia is going to come out ready to just absolutely smash and roll their way into a championship game and try to defend that title. I think you got your championship, and now it's time to button up another one and put a stamp on, we're starting this dynasty, and we're going to start it by absolutely obliterating Ohio State. So that's kind of where I see this game going. And then that can take us to the championship game, where if both of us turn out to be right, we're going to get Georgia and Michigan in a rematch of last year. That was an entirely too entertaining game for me, because I told Mark that Georgia was going to absolutely steamroll Michigan. And by halftime, he was just crying and sending me texts saying, "Shut up. I don't want to hear anything about it." It's hey, I wasn't saying anything. You're the one that brought it up. I was just going to let it lie. But I don't think it'll be that lopsided this year, but I still do think Georgia will be the better team in the playoff, in the championship.
Yeah, I going into the Orange Bowl last year, I was very pessimistic on what was gonna happen in that game, the outcome of that game. I thought we could win, but I definitely didn't think we were gonna win. After watching what Georgia did or didn't do in the SEC championship last year against Alabama, and how poorly we lost, and how poorly we played and how badly we lost, after going 12-0, I was just like, oh yeah, no. This is the Georgia team that I know. This is the Georgia team that I've grown up with, that has gotten my hopes up only to just crush them in fantastical ways, because that was what was expected, and that was what I was anticipating going into playing Michigan. I was like, Michigan is playing with their hair on fire. They're actually playing for something. Georgia's just doing what they've always done. Been good enough to embarrass you on the biggest stage. So no one was more surprised than I was with the outcome of the Orange Bowl last year. And ever since that Orange Bowl, Georgia has just been doing things that I've never seen them do for as long and as consistently as they've done it. We're in uncharted waters in my lifetime with this team. So it's hard, and I'm still not to a point where I would flex my chest and say, fuck yeah, we're Georgia. Fuck yeah, we're going to beat the shit out of Michigan when we see them. It'll be no different than last year. I'm still hesitant on all that. I just, it's because it is my team. I see the weaknesses. I see the holes. I see the areas where we could get beat, and that concerns me. And I just don't know why people haven't figured it out, or at least tried to attack it more. LSU did it in the SEC championship. They're like, oh yeah, we can throw it on Keely Ringer because he's a terrible cornerback. He's a 5-star rated cornerback who should be a safety because his hips are as stiff as concrete. He can't get leverage on a receiver. The only way he defends the receiver is either the quarterback just overthrows it by 5 yards, or he tackles him and gets a PI. He's not a good player. He's talented. He'll be a great safety in the NFL, but he is a dog shit cornerback. And I don't like, to me, there's a recipe to beat Georgia, and it's out there for the world to see, but no one's done it yet. So I think that Georgia can beat both Ohio State and Michigan. Will they? I'm not there yet. I'm still so snake bitten by all of the times where, like Justin, I hope you're right. I hope this is the beginning of a dynasty and something that I can start to feel confident in. But I'm still like just flabbergasted and enjoying the show. Like, I'm still surprised at our wins. Hopefully that changes. But I definitely am not a confident Georgia fan. I'm a very happy with the results Georgia fan.
That's fair. I think, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a repeat of last year, but I do think Georgia is going to be the better team and going to win. More than anything, in that I have more confidence in Georgia's offense to perform well against Michigan's defense than I do of Michigan's offense to perform well against Georgia's defense. I think if you look at them, just the way they're constructed and the way they play, I think Georgia and Michigan have similar defenses in just talent-wise and the way that they can shut another team down. But I think Georgia has a much better offense than what Michigan does. And so I think Georgia can attack that Michigan offense in ways that the Michigan offense cannot similarly attack the Georgia defense. So I give the nod to Georgia in that.
Yeah, the good thing and one thing to look out for non-Georgia fans, especially if you don't have a dog in the fight of any of the postseason games, is that Georgia has yet to really take the reins off of the defense. We've done it a couple times with our offense where we threw it when we had to throw it against Tennessee. We also did it early on in the SEC championship just to let LSU know that we were here to fucking win the game, not just playing it. And we have kept our defense playing very vanilla the whole season. We have not mixed up our looks like we did last year. And I think that once we get to the postseason, that all that ends. I think Kirby will fully unleash the defense, and you will see Georgia at their full capabilities. And I think that could be scary for whoever we go up against. And in that aspect, I am confident in, but I will still be biting my nails and nervous as shit the day leading up to the game, because that's just how I am as a fan.
Well, we managed to cover all of the bowl games in under 2 hours. Pretty impressive for us. We can't even cover the NFL slate in that in that little time on a typical weekend. Speaking of the NFL, if you're wrapping up with us, head over to Amazon Prime if you got it. And if you don't got it, I'll give you my login information. You can watch the Jaguars and Jets. Currently, our predictions from last night are looking pretty good. Jags are up 13-3. I'm going to put strong consideration into going and watching the rest of that game myself, as a matter of fact.
Well, don't waste your time watching Air Force Baylor. Air Force is up 23-7 with 55 seconds left in the third quarter. So it doesn't look like our prediction for the Baylor Bears ever really came to fruition.
Hey, good news for Air Force though. I'm glad at least one of the Armed Forces teams is able to win a football game.
Or they're at least winning. There's still a quarter and 48 seconds left. So, but yeah. Let's kick it off of here. I'm going to go watch the Jets, Jags, and we'll be talking with all you bastards next week.
Yeah. Have a good one. Later.